Tell me Cinematic Adventures is back. I need to hear these words.
Well, he's not as back as we would have hoped.
He's still busy? Yes, I'm still busy. I'm a teacher during a global pandemic, so you do the math. But we're not here to talk about those kinds of depressing things. We're here to talk about things that we love, which are movies. So let's get into it. And I can't think of any better way to come back from this little hiatus than talking about one of my most favorite cartoons of all time, The Emperor's New Groove. The Emperor's New Groove falls in line with those other early thousands Disney films by being one of the most criminally underrated cartoons I've ever seen, maybe even more so than Atlantis the Lost Empire. And I tried to think, what exactly was it about that era of Disney which made these cartoons so underrated? I think around that time in the Disney studio history, there was kind of this new wave of animated films that were coming along. They were a bit more mature. They were a bit more off the beaten path than most Disney audiences were used to, and maybe families just weren't exactly ready for that kind of content. Not only were they more mature, but they were also just a little bit different. They were not exactly stories that you had heard of before. Most Disney films up until that point were just reenactments on fairy tales that the general public was very familiar with, but Atlantis the Lost Empire, Brother Bear, The Emperor's New Groove, Treasure Planet, these are all stories that no one had ever heard of. And so the marketability of these films was a bit more difficult than those older ones that were just plays off of fairy tales that we already knew. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's taken so long for such masterpieces like The Emperor's New Groove to come into the spotlight. But hopefully, with this review, I can do my part to bring it into the recognition that it so deserves. I can't start this review without gushing about what could possibly be my most favorite cartoon character of all time, Kronk. In terms of sheer likability, Kronk might even top Bugs Bunny for me as one of the best cartoon characters of all time, if not the best. I think the only reason why Bugs Bunny might have a slight edge to him is that Bugs Bunny is this archetypal icon of American cartoons, almost like Mickey Mouse. But seriously, how could you watch anything with Kronk in it and not be smiling from ear to ear? I was tempted to watch Kronk's New Groove because, just imagine you're one of your most favorite characters in their own solo spin-off movie. But I heard from a few of my friends a recommendation to not watch it, so maybe I'll just skip that. But in any case, any kind of scene that he's in The Emperor's New Groove is it's irresistible. This big, lovable, dorky, surprisingly intelligent character brings an incredible amount of nuance to otherwise a cast of yin and yang characters. He's that kind of archetypal character that is just born into the wrong crowd, or he just stumbled into the wrong crowd at least. He's got a heart of gold, but he's kind of simple. He's kind of weak. He's almost a bit like Fredo from the Godfather trilogy. He's not nearly as unlikable as Fredo. You don't necessarily want to strangle him like you do with Fredo, but they have similar characteristics in the sense that they have good hearts. They just are kind of in the wrong crowd, and they get swept away by their own innocence, by their own naivety, however you say that. A lot like Forrest Gump, we love Kronk because unlike the other characters where it's their ego or their quest for power that guides them through life, with Kronk it's just his unwavering moral compass. What a gift to be blessed with the voice of Patrick Warburton. Just like Jim Carrey in Ace Ventura or Robert Downey Jr. in Iron Man, I can't imagine any other actor voicing Kronk than this big, strapping, hilarious guy. Actually, this entire movie is perfectly cast. And kind of like Kronk with Patrick Warburton, all of the characters kind of almost look and sound exactly like their voice actors, like their respective voice actors. You got David Spade, who kind of looks like the guy who would, take your lunch money when you were growing up in school. He's got kind of that voice, that sort of like swagger to him that's like a little bit false, but like you kind of respect it at the same time. You have Eartha Kitt, who's kind of this wiry looking woman with some very sharp facial features to herself. You got John Goodman, who's kind of this big old guy with a heart of gold. And then, of course, you have Patrick Warburton voicing Kronk, who I've already touched upon. But it bears repeating that he's just, the same kind of character that he voices. A guy who's really innocent and, of course, lovable. And I can't help but think that part of that was probably done entirely on purpose. I'm sure that the directors and or the writers wanted to get actors that fit the exact persona, the exact image of their characters, or maybe it was kind of vice versa, like which came first. But either way, I'm not complaining because it works perfect. The movie follows this extremely selfish emperor named Emperor Kuzco who wants to set up his Kuzcotopia in a unsuspecting villager's village. And this is probably the only aspect of the film that I don't really like, is that it's very Disney, even though it came out during a time where whatever direction the plot was going in was not very predictable, in the sense that you know what's going to happen. I mean, you know that these two are going to go on some kind of long journey together. You know that Kuzco is going to make some huge 180 turn in character. You know that eventually he's not going to put Kuzcotopia up there. And you know that everyone's just going to end up, with their arms around each other singing Kumbaya. But even then, the movie does it in such an entertaining way, then I can excuse it for that. I love the opening scene where the old guy's thrown out the window. Sorry! And then Pacha helps him down and he's all like, beware the groove, groove. I believe it's the same voice actor for Piglet, which just somehow makes it like 10% better. Part of the charm of this movie is that it feels so real and so organic that sometimes you forget you're watching a movie. It almost feels like you're watching a bunch of cartoon characters that don't even know they're being filmed. Like, it starts to feel like an SNL skit or something. It's almost as if like the writers didn't even have control over what the characters say. It shares similar qualities to Tangled in that sense. I don't really know how to describe it, but you can tell the difference. Like, for example, if you're watching a lesser quality film like Onward, it just feels very movie. Like, the characters say exactly what you think characters in a movie would say. The plot points follow exactly what the plot points you think would follow in a movie that do. But for some reason, movies like Tangled and The Emperor's New Groove that have some really original approaches, even though their source material might not be that original, it just feels like these characters are in front of a camera that they don't even know exists. I suppose there's a term for it in like screenwriting classes, but I don't really know what it is, so that's the best I can do at describing it. A great example being the dinner scene where Kronk is kind of scared that he's mixing up the poison, so he comes along and says, "Did you see that sky today? Talk about blue." There are some quotes in films that just work as quotes. They're not even necessarily applicable to other things, but they're just so much fun to say that you can't help but say them like over and over and over again. I really hope that I encounter some situation in my life where I can just sit down at dinner and be like, "Did you see that sky today? Talk about blue." And then like everyone cracks up. If everyone laughs, if one person laughs, I'll know I've found my people. Yzma and Kronk concoct an idea to get rid of the Emperor so that Yzma can assume the throne. So they go over to their secret lab where she has to pull the lever, Kronk. Now, I am acutely aware, as I hope many of you are, that there are water slides that operate in the same way as the entrance to Yzma's secret lair. And I haven't done this yet, but it's definitely on my bucket list to go up to one of those slides and ask the unsuspecting lifeguard to pull the lever, Kronk. And then as I go down, wrong lever! I could die a happy man if that ever happens. Also, I find myself sometimes throughout the day when it approaches that particular time and I'm excited about the meal that I'm going to eat, or maybe I've just been working too much and I need a break, I need to get some food in my system. It makes it 10 times better for some reason to just be like, it's dinner time! Another part of Kronk's charm is how good of a cook he is. If his personality doesn't win you over, then I'm sure his spinach puffs will. Just make sure that he doesn't burn them. Oh, they're so easy to make, I'll get you the recipe. And if that part of him still doesn't win you over, then I bet his theme music will. It took me about 20 viewings to realize that there are some of those like Aztec carvings or whatever in the back that have these giant arrows pointing at him. It's a nice little touch from the animators. I'm trying to go maybe 1 to 2 scenes in this film without talking about it, without stopping and discussing it. But each one is just so good that it's really impossible not to. Kronk feels guilty about getting rid of the Emperor, and so then his shoulder angel and his shoulder devil pop up. And if you haven't seen the movie, then I'm sure you've at least seen the memes where he says, no, he's got a point. Even if they didn't make a meme out of that, the whole dynamic that he has going on between his shoulder angel and shoulder demon is just hilarious. When you have a movie where even the voice actors playing kids do a good job, you know you've hit the jackpot. I mean, I know that I said previously that every single person that's cast in this movie does a good job, but when child actors, the ultimate litmus test of whether or not you have good actors on your hands, do a good job, then you're golden. Dad, I ate a bug today! Oh, was Mom cooking again? Underrated line. This is a small detail, but the fact that the writers decided to include a snort in a angry pregnant lady's rant is just gold and kind of risky too. That kind of behavior just I gotta go watch something. And by the way, that is sound advice. If you're ever angry, just go watch something. It's very soothing. Just be sure that you have some good music to listen to. A lot of the plot beats of this movie are character driven rather than coincidence driven or just necessity driven, which I'm a big fan of. Kuzco is saved because of Kronk's guilt, and then he's saved again because of Pacha's guilt. If there wasn't so much guilt in this movie, then he would be dead in about 10 minutes. And I agree with Kuzco when he's lost in the jungle and that little bug gets eaten by the spider. Freakiest thing I've ever seen. And where did the squirrel get a balloon? And also, why am I questioning the logic of a movie where a dude turns into a llama? When Pacha saves Kuzco from the Panthers, this dialogue when they're right about to go over the waterfall is just delicious. Uh-oh, don't tell me. We're about to go over a huge waterfall. Yep. Sharp rocks at the bottom? Most likely. Bring it on. I think that it was the VHS copy of Monsters, Inc. that I owned when I was a kid that had the trailer for The Emperor's New Groove on it. And since I watched Monsters, Inc. about 600 times as a kid, I basically memorized the entire trailer of The Emperor's New Groove long before I even watched it. So even as a little kid, I just love that little bit, where they go off the waterfall. Booyah! Kind of like with Kronk saying, "Did you see that sky today? Talk about blue." Where it's like, it's a good quote, but you can't necessarily apply it to different types of scenarios in life. There are other quotes in this movie where the delivery is so good that you can't help but quote it because it's just fun to say. For instance, when Kuzco is angry at Pacha and he goes, "Eh, Pacha?" After Kuzco and Pacha are trapped in this forest and they know that they have to be stuck together until they return back to the palace, you think that the movie is going extra Disney on us by taking the villain and turning him into a good guy just because of one good deed from the good guy. But fortunately, the writers / the screenplay are more intelligent than that. It turns out, in fact, that Kuzco was deceiving Pacha by trying to bring him back to the palace. So that is good. Good on them. However, it does lead to one of the nastiest scenes in any kind of animated film, with scorpions crawling down their back and bats filling up their mouths. I know that I just praised this movie for not being coincidence-driven, but seriously, bats to get you out of a predicament? Ugh, I still get kind of squeamish when I watch it. And when I think about it, does anyone else ever practice their victory dance when they save someone from falling off a cliff? It's hard to depict someone who is evil and also make them appear genuinely funny and genuine. I think they did it pretty well with Hades and Hercules, but I think they might have done it even better with Yzma. She is evil, but she strikes you as the kind of woman, or whatever creature she is, who could be easily defeated. So she is threatening, but there isn't any real fear attached to it. She kind of gets the edge taken off through her humor and a little bit of humanity that pokes out every once in a while. The restaurant scene is legendary. I could watch this scene all day. It almost feels like its own short film within a feature film. Perfect pace, character development almost across the board, hilarious dialogue, hugely inventive. I could go on. I mean, it's almost like a comedy that you would see on a stage. Like, just watch it if you haven't already. And then there's another line that I hope I can sometime use in real life. Wrestled you in high school. Of course, I didn't wrestle in high school, so that might prove difficult. But I definitely have opportunity to say, and indeed I already have said, "It's your birthday!" One of my many useless talents, if you haven't already guessed, is memorizing movie quotes. And I hope that someday I'll be able to memorize the entire restaurant scene. It might seem like a complete waste of time. It is. But I think that it's just going to be fun to maybe one day have that scene perfectly floating up in my mind. With the size of the tent that Kronk sleeps in at night, I can only help but think that it's for his teddy bear, which if it is, then that makes me love him even more. I remember the first 20 times I watched this movie, the scene where Kronk bursts into the tent after he realizes who Pacha is. Yzma, what? Oh! That little piece of dialogue made me laugh uncontrollably for at least 90 seconds. I remember one time in particular, I was a little more than sleep deprived when I was watching it, and I was rolling on the floor. This movie taught me that there are certain materials that you should never try to break down because it is pretty much hopeless. When Yzma and Kronk are on the search for Kuzco and they come across Pacha's family, their family, who is a little too resourceful if you ask me. Like, seriously, they act as if like intruders break into their house on a daily basis. I mean, the system they have for taking care of them is unbelievable. Like, how often does this happen to you guys? But anyway, they put them into the closet, and Yzma says, "All right, Kronk, break the door down." "Break it down? Are you kidding me? This is hand-carved mahogany." So if I'm ever in a position where I'm in a closet that is hand-carved mahogany, I guess I'm screwed because not even Kronk can break it down, much less me. Another example of this movie's wonderful self-awareness is the scene with the map trails, like when Kuzco and Pacha are running away from Yzma and Kronk, and they have like I think they're the ones with the red trail, and the bad guys are the ones with the purple trail. And they look down and they see that there's a trail going, and they're like, well, whatever, we're just going to go with it. Not only does this movie acknowledge its plot holes, but it actually embraces them. Like when they get back to the palace, I'm like, wait, how did you guys beat us? And then Kronk like pulls down a map from the ceiling, and he's like, I don't know, by all accounts, it doesn't make sense. And then later on, after Yzma's been turned into a cat and she's falling down, the guard is like, for the last time, we did not order a giant trampoline. You know, pal, you could have told me that before I set it up. It's like the animators were like, yeah, I mean, we have to have some kind of convenience to keep the movie going. And actually, we're making fun of ourselves by including these inconveniences. But you know what? We're embracing them, okay? Also, don't ever, ever, ever insult Kronk's spinach puffs, because that is the only thing that will set him off to try and murder you. And this scene right here almost completely takes away all of the redemptive qualities of Kronk, because he tries to kill Yzma. I mean, I realize that he was in sort of a blind rage, and yes, he does things that he shouldn't do, and later on he regrets it, but I'm just like, dang, like, I guess there's more of a murderous intent in him than I thought. Later on, Yzma is trying to kill the actual Emperor Kuzco so that she can assume the throne, and she deceives all the other guards into thinking that he killed Emperor Kuzco. And so when the guard turns into a cow, and he goes, hey, I've been turned into a cow. Can I go home? I guess if there was ever an excuse to take a day off, it's when you've been turned into a cow. Another underrated line from this film is when the guards are jumping down the chute or whatever, and they're like, come on, man, no one lives forever. Ah! I mean, yeah, they're correct. It's just an interesting thing to put into a kid's movie. And eventually all is restored. Most importantly, the relationship between Emperor Kuzco and the Groove Guy. And even Yzma finds a less than perfect, but certainly a whole lot less gruesome than your average Disney death fate in being a squirrel scout, or whatever it's called.
I'm so proud of you guys.
And then comes the only other flaw that I have with this movie, is the end credit song by Sting. Up until this point, it's been extremely zany, and it's been just a crazy wild ride. And then you get this song that's almost reminiscent of like a slow dance at a 1980s high school senior prom. But it's a very small complaint in the grand scheme of things, and it hardly affects the overall effect of one of the greatest Disney cartoons ever. As I'm talking about this, like, it might actually be my number 2 most favorite Disney cartoon of all time. Number 1, of course, being The Lion King. Okay, don't worry. The Lion King will always be the greatest. But this one, definitely, it's up there. It's up there. If you haven't seen it yet, then please do yourselves a favor and go watch it right now, because you will not regret it. It is one of the most entertaining cartoons I've ever seen, with one of the greatest characters I've ever seen. It's just a grand old time. So get yourself to watch it, you and a bunch of friends to watch it. Doesn't really matter what the combination is, just go watch it. And I'm giving this one a 9.5 out of 10. So have you seen The Emperor's New Groove? What did you think about it? Also, what is your most favorite cartoon character of all time? Whatever your answer is, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I truly appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next cinematic adventure.